today what we're going to be looking at is knife fighting, right? In Japanese martial arts, they call it Tantojutsu. Now, another word that's very similar that people tend to get mixed up is Tojutsu. So I want to kind of go over the differences between the two so that you guys understand from a knowledge perspective the two, because classical Japanese tend to use those words interchangeably and they're not quite the same thing. Tojutsu just means the art of the blade. Tojutsu is your general overview of blade fighting in Japanese martial arts. So we have Tojutsu. From Tojutsu is like Kenjutsu, Iaijutsu, Tantojutsu, etc., etc., Sojutsu, so on and so forth. There's lots of different kinds of jutsus that kind of go underneath Tojutsu. So Tojutsu is blade fighting. There are lots of times you'll look at videos on the internet, YouTube, and you'll see Tojutsu, and you'll see them using knives or swords or whatever, but they're using more of a generic word. To think of Tojutsu, the way we would use it in English language, imagine going into a school and they say, we teach blade fighting. Well, they're not telling you what kind of blade they're using, they're just saying blade fighting. That's Tojutsu. So Tojutsu is the generic overall word in classical Japanese martial arts, and Koru Bujutsu. So what we have here is a lot of different types of blades. I kind of want to go over them a little bit and talk about what we're going to be working with today for the most part. Okay. Anyone who's ever trained with me, whether you're in one of our schools or you're in one of the online Ninjutsu dojo or whatever, you guys know that I do like to have a family atmosphere. I like to have everyone trust each other and train and have a good time. I think that's very important. The reason I think that's important is because you're going to be training in techniques that is going to inflict a lot of harm. And unless you trust the person that you're training with, you really can't train those techniques completely because there's always going to be a little bit of holdback. You know what I'm saying? And even though we're not hurting one another, we're still training in an art that can hurt people. And so we do have to take that part of it kind of serious. You know what I mean? When you're carrying knives, it's important to know what kind of knife are you carrying for what purpose. Okay? So when we look at classical Japanese samurai koru bujutsu, generally speaking, they would carry these three blades right here. They would have, the katana, which would be on their hip, right? They would have the kodachi, or some schools have a wakizashi, right? We use kodachi. They would have this, the short sword, the companion sword to the katana, right? Or they would carry the tanto, which is this particular blade here, and it's just it's the shorter sword, shorter than this, okay? We live in a time period, now this is where you're getting my influence to this, okay? This isn't like written on some ancient scroll. We live in a modern day where some people are very hurtful and they want to hurt you, right? And we are going to die. Every one of us is going to die, but not all of us have to die at the hands of another human being, right? That is true. So when you guys are wanting to live your life, live life, be free, do what you got to do to be happy. You're the only one that's in charge of your happiness. No one else is responsible for your happiness but you. Boom. But protect it. This knife here is a knife that we have in the Budo Ninjutsu store, so it's ninjutsusuperstore.com. One of my students is a black belt, but this knife is designed to be a survival knife. We use this when we do our camping, when we do Seizon Jutsu, our survival training, survival tactics. You would never want to use this particular blade for self-defense. Not that you can't, it's just pretty fucking big. And to carry this big, heavy thing around with you everywhere you go just doesn't make a lot of sense. This was designed to do hard labor and work, to baton wood, to use as a mini axe if needed. To do flint and steel and all that kind of stuff. So this kind of knife, although is great for survival, and I think everyone should have it in their bag, their bug out bag, this isn't something I would carry with me every single time I had to go to the store. It just doesn't make a lot of sense, right? Now this would be something, this and this is similar. It's just a tanto, it's just a classical Japanese tanto. But again, it's classical, it's a classical weapon. This would have been very useful at the time, but for our time period, this is just too big. Although it was the functional blade at the time. It isn't the functional blade anymore. So I don't think carrying around a classical weapon is going to work either just because of how bulky the thing is. You know what I mean? You got to carry around a scabbard and everything else, a saya. And plus you also got to make sure you know the laws of where you live. I think this is for Kansas, I think that's going to be I think the blade's too big to be carrying anyway. I think 6 inches is the maximum in Kansas. if I remember right. I don't know. I know with the concealed carry license and all that, things slightly changed. This right here is this is what I use from a survival perspective. This is about half as big as a Tonto. It's a single edge. It doesn't have anything on it but an edge, and it's dull. This is what I use when I'm trying to create fire, you know, and things like that. I think that you should always have a very functional piece of steel that doesn't break. You've used it a million times. It's there. You do not want to have one knife to do everything. So even if you have a pocket knife that you carry with you, then that's what you use it for. Pulling your knife in a self-defense situation is extremely, not just probable, but practical. Pulling the knife and getting a fast enough draw to get it out may not be. But I'm telling you right now, if I pull this out of my pocket, I can hit flesh and bone with this piece harder than I can hit with my hand. So it already becomes a functional striking weapon, which that's what a knife is. You can either, a knife isn't going to grab somebody. A knife is going to strike somebody. Here's what you're using with it. You're going to strike their skin. You're going to strike their body. So when I draw this out of my pocket and I'm coming into this, I don't always have to just draw it and then flip it out and start cutting. You can draw and start using it for striking to create the distance. And once you strike them, then you can pull it out and get it ready for cutting purposes from that perspective. But you want to have something that you can easily, has a clip on it, that you can easily pull. It's small enough that you can hold it in your hand to help make your punches stronger, and it has a little bit on each end, so you can use it for striking on hands, neck, throat, all these things, the soft tissue of the face, to create more damage. So just because you're carrying the knife doesn't necessarily mean you got to stab someone with the damn thing or cut off their damn carotid artery. I mean, you don't always have to go to that extreme. But carrying it does give you options. And that's the one thing that you have with a knife, is you have options. And that is what's important. I think that if you're going to carry a knife, it needs to be the size of the hand. It needs to be able to have a little bit on both sides so you can use it for striking purposes. It needs to have a mechanical lever to be able to pull it and draw it quickly without losing control. I also want to make sure that the blade is flat on one side, completely flat. I don't want a double-edged blade. I don't, and I'll tell you why. I'm trained in Jujutsu, and I want to be able to control my opponent. So if I get close enough to grab someone and pull them in, I want to be able to put a backing on that and push down and maybe hold them. Because again, killing doesn't always have to be the end result. Restraining does. Evasion does. So I want to make sure that if I have someone in a position, I can put my hand on the back of it and push on it and restrain them. Or if I want to make some sort of a cut, a good cut, you're going to need to do it anyway. If you look at the way the majority of Japanese swords and blades are, one side has an edge, the other side don't. So you see lots of classical koru techniques where they'll put the blade on and then they press and then they pull through. And the reason for that is they factor in the fact that you're going to be full of fear, anxiety, and everything else. Your fine muscle control is gone. You're going to be shaking your ass off. I mean, you're in a lethal situation. That ain't the time for you to be a surgeon and cut out someone's liver like Jack the Ripper. Most people don't have that kind of control in that situation. So you want to have this side of the edge to be hold, so you can push and hold them down or make some sort of cut that you need, right? You want to make sure that you got a fillet blade on one side and a serrated edge on it as well. And that's because sometimes you want to saw. Again, a knife gives you options. You don't always have to pull your knife for self-defense. You might need to saw through something. You might need to cut if you find some herbs or a certain flower, and you're in a certain region where that flower, that herb don't grow around you, but you want to take it home because you can keep it. Well, then you want to have something that will be able to get the job done. And again, that's with giving you options, right? For me personally, I keep my knife, I don't put it in my pocket. I keep it on, if I bring my purse down, I would show you, but on my purse I have different compartments, but on the outside of my purse, I have this little pocket, and I just slide it in there, because it's much easier for me to grab that and have it, because I always have my purse with me. Damn, if it ain't one thing, it's another, isn't it? So that's what I do personally, is I make sure that I put it on my purse so that I can draw it that way, because I'm not always going to have it on my actual clothing. You know what I mean? But if I'm going somewhere, where I have my purse, I want to have a knife, right? But if I'm going somewhere and I don't take my purse, well, I probably don't need a knife. I'm not in that situation. I go in the backyard to walk my dogs. I'm not taking my purse with me. I don't need a damn knife to go out there either. Do you know what I mean? So it's that concept. I mean, preparation, right? Always preparing for the situation is much better than reactionary. You don't want to be able to react to something. There's that old saying, warriors act, only fools react. Violence in any realm, you guys, doesn't solve a problem. It eliminates a person. It may eliminate an individual or an animal or an object, but it doesn't solve the problem. Keep that in mind, okay? Now, the reason, I want to say this before we get to the next section, because a lot of people ask me in the online dojo, they say, well, I want to learn calligraphy. Because I teach, the calligraphy, and I write calligraphy for my students and so on and so forth. And a lot of the videos I put online, you see that I get the kanji and I say this means this, so on and so forth. Kanji and calligraphy go hand in hand with fighting because it teaches you the concept of once I put the brush on the page, I can't take the brush back. You have to live with what you put on the paper. It's not like, if I dip my brush in the ink, I put it on the paper and I start writing calligraphy. That's it. I can never take the ink off the page. You're never going to be able to take your knife off of someone if you have to use it. Remember that. And that is very important. Some people don't think about, well, what happens if I do it? And that's probably why we're in a position that we are today with many different things from a social perspective. They don't think about other people's feelings or what could happen if they do something. You know what I mean?